Good evening out there, KDON listeners. This is Bob Irwin, your host for Fired Up, and this show is coming to you from the gun store in Las Vegas, Nevada. We are live on KDWN Talk Radio at 7:20 a.m., but you know that if you're listening to this. If you're watching the show, we are also simultaneously on YouTube. If you dial up YouTube, Fired Up with Bob Irwin, you will see a live picture of us as we're broadcasting this show. So we've become a multimedia giant here in the last couple of weeks. This show, Fired Up, is all about guns, related politics, and self-defense issues. We are heard around the world at kdwn.com/streamer/ and on the aforementioned YouTube all over the world. We do encourage questions and comments because of the time delays between the radio broadcast and the YouTube broadcast. There are a few seconds difference between each one, which precludes us at the moment from taking live call-ins. So if you have a question or comment, we would like you to email us at firedupwithbobirwin.com. It's right there this time, so I don't have to say it 30 times a show. We will try and answer your questions on next week's show or your comments on next week's show because of our time format, looking at the computer and getting the question, doing the research, what the answer is. Although Mike normally knows everything legal off the top of his head, sometimes we have to look up things. We always have an attorney on board to answer legal questions or to address the legal issues in shootings. And it is my main man again this week, defense attorney Michael Giles. Welcome to the show again, Michael.
Thanks for having me back, Bob. I always enjoy coming in and doing the show with you.
We have a kind of a brain trust between the two of us. Mike is an ex-deputy sheriff. Before he went to law school, we taught some police academies together years ago. And pretty well-rounded, but we got to have time to look everything up, so you can't call us. You got to send us an email. Right there, and we will get that back to you next week. We will answer all the emails. The ones that are interesting to most everybody, we will answer on the air. And we start out with that, and that's because of last week's emails, and there were several. The main, most common thread was a fellow named Charles here in Las Vegas, talking about the shooting of the escaped convict, David Sweat, last week. The first of the two convicts had a shotgun and apparently pointed it at the police, and they shot him. Mr. Sweat, however, was caught walking down a road. The police, state police SWAT officer ordered him to stop, and he ran. And the officer then shot him. Didn't kill him, fortunately. Shot him enough to bring him to a halt, and they arrested him. And we, both of us, are always lecturing callers and listeners and viewers, don't shoot at fleeing bad guys. He's not a danger to you. So how come, why was this officer shooting him in the back when he's running away, when he was unarmed? He had a knife or something on him, but they didn't know that at the time. He was just running away. Why was that immediately declared by everybody and his brother to be a valid shooting? And the answer is in the details of Garner versus Tennessee.
That's it. There's a very famous Supreme Court case. We teach it in police academies. We teach it to lawyers, and it's called Tennessee v. Garner. What happened there was a police officer couldn't chase down a fleeing felon, the kid who had stolen a purse, and he shot him. And the question became, why would you shoot a fleeing felon? Well, it was the law at the time. You could do it. So we got this new case, and it basically says that in order for police to shoot a fleeing felon, they must be able to articulate why that individual posed an immediate and substantial threat to the safety of others.
Right.
I'm with everybody else on this one. I'm a defense attorney. Mr. Sweat had been in prison for a homicide, a rather brutal homicide. He had
Of a police officer.
of a police officer. He had made noise that he would never be taken alive. There was concern that he might decide that the right answer was to start taking people out. And I'm sure every single one of the brave men and women who were out there looking for these two for, I think it was 20 some odd days that they were looking for them, had been told, we've got to get them back into custody. So that's why they shot the fleeing felon in this case, because all of his behavior up to that point had indicated he was a danger, an immediate and severe danger to the people of the area.
And that's clearly true. And the other factor here is that when you're shooting at somebody who broke into your house and they're running away, they're not a danger to anybody. And the law says they're innocent until proven guilty. This guy has already been adjudicated in a court, a felon, declared dangerous, locked up, put in jail for a murder, convicted of murder. We know that he is a bad guy for sure. He is not the suspect. He is, in fact, the murderer who is running away. Huge difference. I used to explain it in my police classes that I was teaching, because we never bring this up really in civilian classes, but in police classes, we would say, if you are shooting Charles Manson, who is running away, or Carol Chessman, or somebody like that, that is a known convicted danger to society, it is reasonable for you to shoot him because you're protecting future victims as yet unknown if he gets away. A little bit different thing than you take from what we conventionally call the suspect. You can't shoot the suspect. You can shoot the murderer.
Absolutely.
For in short term. So Charles, I hope that answers your question. There's a huge difference because of the conviction and because everybody knew this guy had said he won't be taken alive. He's threatened everybody, et cetera, et cetera. He's a self-declared target of the police. And if he had escaped and the officer had not fired and he had escaped into the woods and killed somebody else, would that police department be liable for that death in a heartbeat if he didn't try to stop him? So that was a good shoot. We always start on the show by talking about a couple of good shootings that took place around the country. And as I usually say, there are more than 200 defensive use of firearms every week in the United States, more than 200. And the media doesn't make a lot of noise about most of them. They made a lot of noise about one here locally in Las Vegas in the last week or so. Wonderful case to use. Too bad somebody had to get shot and killed. But let me read you a shortened version, and then we're going to talk about this in some detail. Most of the Las Vegas media carried this over and over. It was on all the media nationwide, probably worldwide. A 23-year-old guy was able to fend off two intruders that broke into his family home last Thursday morning. He killed one and wounded the other. What happened was just after 9 a.m., a 29-year-old woman with a 33-year-old male accomplice knocked on the door of a home, and a 12-year-old boy answered the door, and they told him, the woman told him, that they were having car trouble. Their car was broken down. They needed to use the phone, and could they come in and use the phone? Could she come in and use the phone? She was apparently by herself. The boy agreed, as a 12-year-old would. He started to close the door anyway. She shoved her way through the door, put him in a headlock. The male intruder came in right behind her, pointed a gun at the boy, at his head, and pushed them back into the room. The intruder then had knocked the kid down. He proceeds through the house, came to a bedroom in the back of the house, kicked the door in, The fellow that was in the room, a 23-year-old older brother of the kid who is now on the floor crying, keeps a .40 caliber pistol next to his bed. As he started to move out of the bed, the intruder fired a shot at him, which missed. He fired back. His return fire apparently hit the guy. He didn't know that at the time. The guy then ran from the bedroom. The bad guys usually do when you shoot back. He came out of the living room, saw the robber still armed, standing by his front door. He shot at him again. The intruder then dropped his gun, ran out of the house. The brother then went back down the hallway, found the female intruder was fighting with his mother. He shot at her, and she also fled. The family called the police. The couple is now outside, trying to get into their car. The older brother, who'd done the firing with his .40 caliber pistol, grabbed a rifle, followed them outside, and fired a shot at the car. He said he was trying to shoot the tire. Good. He didn't hit it. That's fine. He didn't hit anybody. We always talk about shooting at people when they're actually running away rather than in the middle of a fight. I can't really blame him for that. We'll talk about that a little bit. But they drove away. They drove, the woman's driving because the guy was hit a couple times, it turns out. They drove to North Vista Hospital, and the male was pronounced dead. The woman was later transferred to UMC in critical condition. Nobody in the house was injured seriously. A few bruises on the boy and so forth. This 23-year-old young man, they have not given out his name, is an absolute hero in this case. Saved his family. The investigation shown a lot of other things we're going to talk about in just a bit as we found out more. But this guy had a gun when he needed it, woke up, used it judiciously, only fired 6 shots total. It was a high capacity, what we call a standard capacity gun. He didn't fire blindly, other than possibly the rifle shot at the end, and I'll forgive him that. When you're in the middle of a thing like this, that's fine. More details, Michael? There's a lot of stuff.
Well, this case is an absolute petri dish of everything that can go right and wrong in a situation. Let's start with, this isn't an uncommon way people try to get into homes. We've had it happen a couple of times here in Las Vegas this year. I see it even more. It doesn't make the news all the time, but the knock on the door, hey, my dog's lost, my kid's lost, my car broke down. Those are the 3 that I see over and over and over again. Right. The one thing that I'm kind of glad, I haven't seen in the media, maybe you have, Bob, but I haven't seen anybody saying, well, other than commenters on the news reports, I haven't seen any of the big talking heads say the .22 caliber firearm that they had, if we had stricter gun control laws, they wouldn't have had that firearm. Because the thing Bob didn't mention is
well, there's more. There's a lot.
The female is at least a 1-time and possibly 3-time felon. The male is a 5 or 7-time felon that we're sure of.
His gun is stolen, et cetera,
out of California. So there is no process that would have stopped them from getting this particular firearm. It's a stolen firearm, and they're already prohibited. Prohibited people will do whatever they have to do to continue behaving. So the young man in this case had a lawfully possessed .40 caliber handgun, a lawfully possessed rifle, and something we talk about in self-defense classes, the will and intestinal fortitude to use them when it became necessary to save himself and his family.
Yeah. And he acted exactly right. He knew how to shoot. He had apparently practiced. One day we'll find out who he is, and I'll be able to talk to him, hopefully privately, and see what was going through his mind and where he got his training. What I didn't mention in this story, there's a lot of details on this. I mean, there's about 4 pages worth of stuff here, but some of the left media immediately jumped on the fact the rifle that he came out with was an AK-47. Oh my God, it was one of them evil assault guns.
Because it would have been better if it was a Remington 700 and 270 or something. The simple answer is, based upon what he, and so everybody's aware, I believe law enforcement has announced they don't anticipate any charges being brought against the young man. It looks like an absolute case of defense of self and defense of others. The only place in the entire thing anybody could have any grief with would be that rifle shot at the vehicle. And as Bob said, in the heat of that moment, he was still trying to save his family and potentially other people. He didn't know if there were more firearms in the car. He didn't shoot at people. He tried to disable the vehicle.
She said he was shooting at the tire, and I've seen that several times in real life shootings. I believe he probably was, just to stop the vehicle, not to shoot the people. And even though the one had damaged his little brother and beat on his mother, like I say, they're okay. They were briefly checked over by medics on the scene, and they're fine. I'm not sure they're psychologically going to be fine. It's hard to sleep nights when you go through one of these. I got to imagine the family is just really jumpy, and will be for years. I mean, this doesn't go without repercussions mentally.
They'll never ever hear the doorbell or knock at the door without thinking about this. Hopefully they take the correct measures, get the right help, talk to the right people. What happens after a fight, after a gunfight, after a use of self-defense is every bit as traumatic as what happens leading up to and during the middle of it. And unfortunately, a lot of folks don't think about that. And the time to contemplate those issues is before you have to use deadly force.
Hopefully this woman will plead to something, and the family won't have to go to trial, and the kid won't have to go testify.
Well, she's going to face some substantial charges, I suspect, because her accomplice died, and she could be charged with his homicide under the felony murder rule. Because
I'm almost sure she will be.
I would expect,
the circumstances here. Because they're committing a violent felony, and he died as a result. And the kid that shot was absolutely valid in what he did. I'm concerned about the 12-year-old that, he's going to blame himself because he opened the door and he knew better. And, they can get children to open the door. The most common one I've seen that I got to believe works every time is a female, usually very innocent looking, knocks on the door with a puppy and says, "We found this puppy. Is it yours? He was sitting on your porch." And what child, what adult isn't going to open the door?
That's right.
And there you are. There's a lot of ways to do it. Don't open the door. Get one of those metal screens on your house that has to be manually unlocked with a key. So if you do open the door and it's something sour, you at least have that barrier to back away from. Those don't stop bullets, so it's tough. But everything you can do, some way to look outside with a camera, something to prevent this. We have had home invasion after home invasion in Las Vegas. This one just went right, finally. And in our concealed weapon classes the last several days, we've had just a tremendous number of people comment. That's one of the reasons they're here. They want to learn how to work their gun better. And perfect.
Absolutely. One thing that occurs to me when you're talking about the puppy, Bob, is we get these preconceptions that these things are the men. This one actually went to plan with what I've seen in the past. The women are every bit as violent and just as dangerous, which is why they go to the door first.
Oh, absolutely.
And they don't step out of the way. So
they look. Yeah. We expect them to be.
That's right.
Nicer, and if you're been married a few times, women are actually meaner. But that's for another show, not for this one. Anyway, this guy did good. I hope to speak with them someday and do some writing on this case, because this is a great case. We've had, as we know, we've had several serious home invasions in Las Vegas in the last several months. Your house is the soft target, guys, and make it not the softest target. As I've advised people, go across the street at night, usually, because these usually happen in the dark, and look at your house compared to the other two. Make sure your lights are brighter, your dog is bigger, your dog sign's bigger, the dog dish in the back porch is bigger than the people next door. You know, do everything
Bushes
you
are
can
trimmed.
to make them not pick your house. You can't stop them, but you can redirect them usually. A little bit here also, I've got to follow up on Uber. Uber is the ride service has now, we've got another shooting case here. This is out of the Tampa Tribune a few days ago. Clearwater Beach, Florida, an Uber driver went to pick up somebody. The guy got in the back seat, and then he reached up and started choking the driver, trying to get his money. The driver is 74. He picked this guy up on Mandalay Avenue about 10 p.m. He's working the app-based thing. He gets the app and says, go to this place. And, you know, so he does. He picks up this 60-year-old guy. They got in an argument over something that was not explained in the fight. It turned into a physical fight. He reached over the front seat and started choking the driver. The driver pulled his gun, and when they were fighting over the gun, it went off, and the passenger, now being the attacker, was hit in the foot. The wounded man, the police came, and everybody came running when they heard the shot. He was taken to St. Joseph's Hospital. He was treated and released. The Uber driver was not injured, has a valid concealed carry permit. Police are continuing to investigate. This particular Uber vehicle was not a gun-free zone. I'm going to add, always I try to, as I explained before, I try to get more than one source on these because you got to, everybody writes stuff a little bit different. The Washington Times carried the same story. They said the police spokesman quoted to them, the driver basically told us the passenger started choking him. The passenger had his hand around the driver's neck. The driver was in fear of losing consciousness. That's when he pulled out a gun in the ensuing struggle that went off. The driver is a retired New York police officer. Surprise. Uber policy, as we all know, prohibits riders or passengers, drivers or passengers, from possessing a gun. They're like mobile gun-free zones. So an Uber spokesman did come on and say the driver's access to their platform has now been terminated. They go by cell phone apps and they just cut his app off, so you don't have to fire him. He just
can't do the job anymore. Disconnect him.
Because he doesn't know where the rides are. So from now on, this driver has made it safe by saving himself, and future attackers now will be safer because they're now enforcing this thing. And the specific one in Nevada, we have Uber.
And we just allowed by statute Lyft, which is a different ride service, and Uber to operate. And now every bad guy who reads the newspapers, and they actually do pay attention to these things, knows that taxi cabs and Uber drivers are unarmed.
There was if you're listening to this locally in Las Vegas, we had a big deal with the taxi cab authority when Uber got licensed, and there's a big fight over that with the cab drivers here who obviously don't like Uber much. And there's another one, Lyft.
There's another one.
Two car services going in now, which will cut into the taxi cabs' income and so forth. And I understand that very much. When we built our indoor range and we started running machine guns, now we have 4 other people who decided that was a great business model. And but the problem here with Uber and Lyft, between them and the drivers, is a little different because they're regulated differently. So the cab drivers are kind of behind, and we are. There's going to be a big political fight over that separately. But anyway, I don't know what Lyft's position is on.
I haven't heard whether Lyft has taken a position or not. Uber very publicly came out and said no drivers are allowed to carry firearms. And here's the thing. Uber drivers are driving their own vehicle. They pay I believe they pay a rent to have the application. And then they're just kind of like a gypsy cab in New York. The way we used to call them is gypsy cabs. And if they can get there quicker than a cab can get there, they can negotiate the fare with the person. So it seems interesting that the company with the app is telling them in your own car, on your own time, you can't go armed even if you're a retired police officer.
Yeah, that was the kicker. That retired police officer thing didn't appear in hardly
Nowhere.
any of the
Yeah.
news reports, and I popped it on the Washington Times, and that explains a lot. And he obviously tried not to shoot the guy. I mean, the fight went on for a while before he got his gun out. And anyway, we have, I think I talked about it last week. We have dominoes not allowed. We had another domino driver shoot somebody last week. There have been several across the country as usual. So you can call Uber now. You can call a cab and rob the passenger and the driver, and call Uber and rob the driver. And anyway, we're gonna break for the half-hour break for the news. I appreciate your tuning in. We're going to be back in a little bit with some more fun like this. Got the website to call in, the email to call in, to text in. All right, we're done.
I didn't hear the music until they cranked it up at the very end, very, very loud. I put in here music. I didn't hear back. You screwed up your microphone when you were fiddling with your code.
Are we still going out over YouTube?
Yes.
Yeah, I gotta fix that part.
Because it didn't turn out. So we're still here, but we're off while the radio's running commercials.
And we're going to do a little work here because the microphones and all that good stuff, trying to get good sound out.
So this guy, non-union guy, is now on the
That's
on
right.
the thing.
We have to pay him, get him up the union scale. In case you're curious, I'm sitting in front of the sign for
It
the
says
gun store. So
We're going to fix that.
Yeah.
We're gonna not have that behind Mike's head. We're going to put it over here next week. You will see improvements as each show goes on. This Uber thing is just driving. I mean, off the.
it's
still
crazy.
off the radio. That's just nuts. That these guys, we get cab drivers robbed and shot, and they're throwing gasoline on them and all sorts of things. And
Yeah.
there they go. Anyway, let me know when we're getting our music. And that's our engineer. You just saw Jim. You saw the top of his head fixing my microphone. Jim is works here as a firearms instructor, actually, and is a prior national shooting champion. But we don't tell anybody that.
I'd put it on the banners outside.
back on the visual, but where we are,
There we go.
I didn't see ourselves. I saw a little picture of my head in a little circle. It looks like one of those targets you throw the water balloons at.
Disconcerting, was it?
Yes,
Yes.
it's disconcerting. The gun store, where we are broadcasting from on East Tropicana, does offer free concealed carry permit classes every Monday, every Wednesday, and every Saturday. If you are unsure of your gun handling, looking at what we've just been talking about, the class is free. We have some excellent instructors that will take you through it. If you want to take the class and actually get a permit, we do charge for the ammunition for the qualification with Metro. That's $15 to $25 depending on the type of gun you got. We have a lead-free range. You have to use our ammunition to qualify. So you can do that, and your cost will be that. It's a little less than $100. Then you got to pay to Metro to get the permit. Which is why the class is free, because I don't really think the police, the government, should be charging you for the right to keep and bear arms. So we don't charge for the class to try and make up for that. My bean counters hate that whole program, but that's for another subject. This is the Albuquerque Journal on the 30th of last month, a couple days ago. This is a case that started in December 2013. A 25-year-old woman faced a murder charge after taking a gun from another woman and defending her by shooting an attacker that had come into the house. Basically, this is an odd case. A guy breaks in or comes in. They know him. He tries to get violent with one of the two women. She pulls a gun and points it at him. He then tries to hit her with a rock and comes at her with a 4-inch pair of scissors. The woman holding the gun panics, can't fire the gun. She hasn't thought this through, and just when it comes to pulling the trigger, can't pull the trigger. The other woman grabs the gun from her hands. The guy then goes after her with the scissors. She fires the gun, shoots him. She's got a serious damage to her hand. We're in a 1-inch stab wound on her neck where he slashed at her, and she got her back of her hand damaged trying to block the knife coming, or the scissors coming at her throat. She is charged with attempt murder, because somebody didn't believe that she was not the original victim. She intervened in the middle. This case is just bizarre to me. But anyway, she went to trial. The jury had a choice of attempt murder or attempt second-degree murder, or, voluntary manslaughter, or whatever that was. And the jury found her not guilty. They looked at, the guy was coming at her with a pair of scissors. So they found her not guilty of the whole thing. The original victim of the attack, however, because she pointed the gun at the guy who apparently wasn't a big enough threat to point a gun at, in somebody's opinion, they're charging her with reckless endangerment.
An accessory, accessory to murder is what they've charged the original, the lady who pulled the firearm first. She is charged as an accessory because the woman who did the shooting was originally charged was murder. I guess the guy died. The guy died.
Okay, the guy died.
So here's the weird part about this. The prosecutor is on record as saying, we thought a .45 caliber handgun was more dangerous than scissors and a rock, which tells me that that prosecutor didn't talk to a use of force expert or a police officer or a training officer. But there's way more to this. So
you could shoot him with a .22,
but not a .45. Apparently, there's some disparity of force.
I'm just thinking.
It's a crazy one. It's nonsensical because any deadly weapon is a deadly weapon. It doesn't matter what it is. 4-inch scissors are just as deadly as a 4-inch knife, or as.
Wait, I'm still working on jokes. You should go back, if you've got a .45 and they only come at you with scissors,
right,
in wherever this is in New Mexico. you should get a smaller gun.
Clearly, it's 32 caliber and below at that point.
For scissors.
For scissors, you would
And
think.
the
Right?
rock
And the rock.
is-
Well, it
yeah,
depends
well.
on the weight of the rock, right? Because it's got
Yeah,
to
and
be
they didn't
ballistic weight.
detail it out.
So here's
Okay.
the thing about the case that's really, truly weird, because we don't have all the facts. We do know, however, that everybody was related in some fashion.
Correct.
It was a blended family. Now,
Yes.
what happens quite often in these cases, if you're ever called on a jury and you wonder why the attorneys do certain things and don't tell you certain things, I'm about to give you a little secret here. There are things we can't put in front of a jury. We know facts, the prosecutors know facts, that because they're outside the scope of the case or they're extremely prejudicial to the case, we're not allowed to tell a jury about. The prosecutors may have known something about the facts that led up to this use of force incident, and they thought that the jury would get that flavor from whatever they presented, and the jury did not. But based on what we know and based on the comment from that prosecutor, I think the jury got it absolutely right. This guy was coming after somebody with a bladed weapon and a rock. She took a firearm from a person who froze up, who probably had a legal right to defend themselves, and used it in defense.
Yeah, and she just continued that woman's self-defense.
Correct.
Who could have fired, apparently. And then one is somebody's ex-husband. They all have the same last name. Everybody's a brother-in-law of somebody, and they're all live in the same house. There's about 13 people involved in this humongous family that I couldn't possibly have detailed out. We only have an hour show here. And that's apparently the reason why the prosecutors looked at this differently. But this is just stupid. I mean, I'm sorry. You know, if I don't care if it's your cousin or your brother or your wife's handmaiden who's trying to stab you with a pair of scissors, and you defend somebody else who's being stabbed and have rocks to beat their head in. Anyway, so they're left with the thing of the woman who is trying to defend herself, who couldn't shoot, and the other woman takes the gun, shoots the bad guy, is found not guilty of any crime, and the woman she's defending, who didn't shoot anybody, is being charged.
Well, she's charged as an accessory.
Right.
Arguably for having the firearm there, bringing the firearm, and maybe, I think the prosecutors think these two women may have colluded to get the situation such that the shooting could happen.
They set it up. I can see that. So,
good prosecutorial common sense tells me that if I can't get the person for the murder, a defense attorney is going to bring that up, point it out. It's going to be very difficult to get the accessory, but they may be able to charge the other woman with some other crime. For example, challenge to fight, assault with a deadly weapon, depending on if the evidence suggests she drew the firearm first, was the primary
that's the
aggressor.
only thing I could think of in this whole scenario that would cause that is that she pulled the gun and the guy then pulled the scissors.
Right.
But that just still doesn't wash. You know,
still not there.
No.
Anyway. A weird one. Very weird one.
Always call a lawyer when you're involved in one of these.
Definitely. Have one on speed dial.
Next case is, this is in Belton, South Carolina on the 25th of June. Anderson County deputies are called at 11 a.m. Thursday morning to a house on Terry Thomas Road for a domestic dispute. The deputies found a handgun laying on the trunk of a car outside the home with a 44-year-old woman and another person standing near the gun. They searched the house and found a 60-year-old man lying on the floor with a gunshot wound to the stomach. The coroner said so we presume the guy said. The coroner said it appears the man went to the home, forced his way inside, was asked to leave. He and the woman in the home got into a physical altercation before she shot him with a .38 caliber handgun. He was transported to the nearby hospital where he died. A lieutenant with the Anderson Sheriff's Office said investigators believe the shooting was a case of self-defense and no charges are expected in the incident. Having a gun available in your home is a really good idea. I just put this case in here. It's a fairly straightforward. The 60-year-old was a neighbor who's been mooning after this woman. Right. And decided they were going to have a relationship.
Whether she wanted it or not.
morning and, said, "Hi, I'm here," kicked the door in and started fondling her, and she got her gun and shot the guy. No charges will be filed in the case, according to the sheriff's spokesman, which is always actually up to the local prosecutor, of course.
Right.
But it's just one of the 150 cases I look at every week. They say, what would have happened if this woman didn't have a gun?
Another case where the story would have been entirely different. Maybe she's murdered. Definitely she's assaulted.
If you don't have a gun in your home and watching this show can't convince you should have a gun in your home, it's a really foolish decision. You have a gun in your home somewhere, hidden away, locked up, you have kids, there's all that sort of stuff that you need to be aware of. People aren't in your house that are drunks or people with short fuses and so on. There are people that shouldn't be around guns. We know that. But if you don't have one of those in your house and you are able to have a gun, even if you hate guns, you may decide you don't hate guns when something like this happens. So, some other political news. Because of the church attack in Carolinas, you guys heard what happened in South Carolina with the little wacko that murdered 9 people. Chuck Schumer, our senator from New York, is calling for new background checks and ban of magazines in the wake of the South Carolina shooting. He will lead the charge to mandate background checks on private gun sales, limit magazines, and increase the reporting of those prohibited from possessing firearms into the federal database. Schumer is the guy who's probably going to take over for Harry Reid as the Democratic leader in the Senate, hopefully the minority leader in the Senate. He contends his proposed changes will not harm constitutional rights of all the gun people. His first list is to close the gun show loophole. This loophole that these guys are buying all their guns. Not involved because this guy bought his gun at a gun dealer, apparently. There was initially a story that his father gave him the gun. Apparently his father gave him some money and he went and bought a gun.
Right.
From
He
a
passed
dealer,
all the background
passed the
checks.
background check. So how are background checks going to stop this shooting? They're not. He passed the background check. Schumer also proposed they increase the speed in which people who are adjudicated mentally incompetent are added to the federal database. For once in my life, I agree with Chuck Schumer. Because what he said in his statement, but not in his proposal, unfortunately, is to report those adjudicated mentally defective. And the key word is adjudicated. That means they've been to court and the judge has said, "You're nuts, you can't have a gun." His bill, however, doesn't say adjudicated.
Nope.
It says any friend or neighbor or healthcare provider, like a dental hygienist or something, could call somebody and they come and take your guns away.
Any report.
So, he talks out of both sides of his mouth. There's a surprise. I think everybody in the gun business and in the gun world agrees that people who are adjudicated mentally incompetent, been to court, a judge has said, you've had a defense, you've had your defense lawyer, you've had a prosecutor, and you had a trial or a hearing of some sort where the judge says, yeah, you shouldn't have guns. Nothing that is in Schumer's bill would have prevented what happened in North Carolina or South Carolina.
Nothing. Absolutely.
And
nothing.
it's just absolute garbage. It's a knee-jerk reaction to take guns away from all you folks again. We have this over and over. The guy's in jail, and they're going to take the guns away from future victims, which they think will make it better. It ain't going to make it better.
Well, and South Carolina actually has a law that prohibits taking firearms into houses of worship. So
He broke the law?
He broke the law, amazingly enough. Even though to the point where he walked in the door with the firearm, he probably hadn't.
Anyway, and that's such a disgusting thing. And now it's being blown, into a lot of political crud about
It
the Civil War and so forth and so on. And
well, and the crazy part about it is Chuck Schumer is saying that he wants reasonable. He doesn't think this will impact the Second Amendment. Chuck Schumer's been a gun grabber for 30 years, and nothing about this is any different other than he's learned incrementalism. Now they're going to try and go after the little things instead of the big overreaching bans. Don't mistake what Chuck Schumer wants to do. He thinks you shouldn't have firearms.
Absolutely. And anyway, I'm going to mention here the gun store. We are lead free. If you want to practice shooting your gun or come shoot with some of our guns, we have been a lead free range for some time now. And our tests have all come back that we're just wonderful. The air is actually cleaner inside the range than it is outside near Tropicana Avenue where trucks are driving by. So if you want to breathe some clean air, you need to come to our range. You just stand around and breathe the air, and anyway, it's good and it's working, and we don't poison our employees or poison children that come in and so forth. I have to address also there's a survey out the left has been just raking over the coals, done by the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia University in New York, shows that 29% of Americans own guns, with a high of 62% in Alaska and a low of 5% in Delaware. And then they go on to say, well, that means there's 310 million guns in the United States, and 5% of gun owners use their guns for hunting, and 10% have attended a safety class. The thing goes on and on and on. And it's garbage. This was a survey. This Dr. Bindu Kailson of the School of Public Health at Columbia University, New York, is also one of Al Gore's buddies on the environmental stuff.
Global warming issues, yes.
Coal is killing
bad.
all our, so we got to get rid of coal and all live in a hut with no heat to save the world and so forth. And he's one of those. This survey that they got all these conclusions from, there's no point in trying to address the individual points, like 29% of Americans own guns, and they know there's 310 million, because you know how they know? They sent an email out to 4,000 people over age 18 and asked them, do you have a gun? What kind of gun? Why do you have a gun? We got 4,000 people who got an email who are stupid enough to respond with how many guns they got and what they keep them and where they keep them and why they bought them and so forth and so on. Any of you out there who get an email
or a phone call
that says, hi, I'm with this research study in the government and I want to know if you have a gun in your house, most of you actually say, no, I don't. That statistically is a fact. And so there's 4,000 people who were dumb enough to respond to this survey are now being used as a wedge to make gun laws for everybody else. And they're only talking to a bunch of fools. Think about that. If you got one of these surveys in the mail, or on an email in this case, and it asks like 40 questions: why you bought guns, do you have any training, you know, what kind of gun you have, you know, da 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 da, how old are you, white, black, purple, whatever. Would you answer it if you owned a gun? Would you put, sure, I'll tell these guys, they have your address, they have your information, where you work, how old you are. There's a lot of stuff on here,
right.
To
when you're out
what
of the
race
house.
you are. What do you do when you're out of the house? Do you lock up your gun or not? Yeah, no, you're not going to answer. So this is 4,000 really naive people who answer this crap. This is absolutely useless data. But they're going to use that to try and make more gun laws. So here it comes. You know, this proves that.
They've already tied this research to another study that purports to show that gun ownership is falling, even though gun sales are going up every year.
Yeah.
That gun ownership is falling because people really don't want guns anymore. And that was in a couple of the big newspapers. This is all coordinated. They get together and they work on these and they say, let's put this out and get the news cycle going.
They address that. The reason gun sales are going up and the volume of people who actually own guns, who said they don't own guns, is going down is because the wackos, I'm sure we're included in that,
probably on their
are
list.
buying extra guns.
Right.
So, you know, and they just theorize that. They didn't ask them, did you buy an extra gun? Because, you know, you're making up for guns the other guys don't own. True story. I'm going back 20 years here. A friend of mine, some years back, went at his school. The teacher took a survey on a piece of paper, write yes or no. Do you have a gun in your house? This was a 3rd grade class, which makes them 12. And his kid was the only one who put no on the piece of paper. His kid didn't know they have a gun because they keep it where they think the kid wouldn't find it, which was another, don't do that, you know. But anyway, the real answer was not 32 yes and 1 no. The real answer was 33 yeses and no nos in his grade school class in the 3rd grade. That's more likely the number in Nevada, although we're somewhere around 40% of the people in Nevada own a gun, according to this survey. Garbage. I want to talk about a couple things because we're going to have to close up here really quick. We've got a Western Trails is running a gun show at the Santa Fe Station on Rancho, July 18 and 19. It's 2 weekends from now. We're going to be there hopefully with selling our brass and stuff. We have announced the Las Vegas Gun Show at the Sports Center on Sunset, July 25 and 26. That show is canceled. They decided not to run it because of the heat and the participation and so forth, too many gun shows. There is not another gun show at the Sports Center until October 17 and 18. We've got a few in between in August in Henderson. We've got one in Crossroads in August. Late August. They're on our website, firedupwithbob.com. You can find the gun show list there that's current. Hopefully, we just added Western Trails today. We didn't know that existed, or I'd have plugged it before now, but it will be at the Santa Fe Station. Please take a listen to the Dennis Bono show that's on right after us. They have a lot of old stuff from Vegas, which is really nice. It's sponsored by the Bootlegger that's owned by a friend of mine, Lorraine Hunt Bono, who is the ex-governor, lieutenant governor in Nevada, and she's a powerhouse right-wing conservative person. So I'd like you to support the Bootlegger restaurant. If you haven't been there, go there. We have discontinued the Pursuit show. It's no longer on. And this is eventually replacing it. That's why we're working on building up the show here. We'll get the signs right and whatnot next couple of weeks. We will be back here next week from 6 to 7 again on News Talk Radio 720 KDON with, again, Mr. Giles in tow. We have a phone number for the office if you wish to call us. Michael and I and a few others that work for us do guest speaker things. If you have somebody in your group that wants somebody to address them on certain issues or talk about guns and this and that, you can get a hold of us at 702-333-0033, which used to belong to somebody who owes a whole lot of money to collection agency.
Because you're getting a bunch of
8 or 9 calls lately, yes. And I've told most of them that she's not here anymore, but, you know, whatever. Website. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. And yeah. I think we did that right. We're probably still on
We're still on YouTube right now, so we'll see you in a week.
Yeah.
Go watch the old shows. They're all up there. Fired Up with Bob.
Watch USA win the world championship in ladies soccer.
Absolutely.
I think it's on now.
Probably right now.
So you're not watching this show, you're watching that and blowing up things, and you can watch this tomorrow because it's on YouTube for the next 20, 30 years.
Forever.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Bob.
Can't find the mouse.
Well, we can always tip the camera over.
I can see it.
We're still there. I don't know if we can clip this part off when we do this.
Sure, we can always.